Imagine this. In the middle of a dying desert, where almost all plant life had disappeared and the ground was so dry it could no longer hold life, people brought in 1 million rabbits. At first, this did not sound like a plan to save nature. It sounded like the beginning of an ecological disaster. Because rabbits are not exactly harmless to the environment. They eat vegetation very fast, reproduce even faster, and if they appear in a land that has already been exhausted, they can completely chew through the last remaining patches of green. History has already proven that, so using rabbits to restore a desert sounded almost like a crazy idea. But the unbelievable part is that this actually happened in China's Kubuchi Desert, a harsh stretch of land in the Ordos region of Inner Mongolia. This was a place once swallowed by sand, stripped bare by wind, and dangerous enough to threaten the communities living around it. Yet after just 30 years, this desert land that once seemed dead began to change. Plants started growing again. The ecosystem recovered in an almost unbelievable way. And the question the whole world began asking was this: how did China manage to bring back to life a dead land that had been buried under sand and dust for more than half a century? The truth behind this story is not as simple as many people imagine. China did not just open cages and release 1 million rabbits to run freely across the Kubuchi Desert. If that had really happened, the result could have turned into a disaster, because in a land that was already dry and exhausted, rabbits could have eaten through the young plants just beginning to grow. The rabbits used in this system were mainly Rex rabbits, and they were placed inside a tightly controlled model. They were kept in limited zones, their numbers were managed, their food was monitored, diseases were controlled, and their waste was processed through a specific system. What makes this model so unusual is that the rabbits were not treated as heroes saving the desert. They were more like one small link in a much larger restoration chain. They ate drought-resistant plants, dry grass, and desert shrubs growing around the edge of the desert, then converted that low-value biomass into organic waste. After being properly processed, that waste could return to the ground and help add organic material to sand that had almost lost its ability to support life. In other words, the rabbits did not create a miracle by themselves. Humans placed them in the right position inside a cycle of plants, soil, organic fertilizer, and ecological management. So, if you were standing in front of a dying desert, would you dare to use an animal as risky as rabbits to restore the land? I really want to know your answer. Comment below and tell me whether you think this was a genius idea or an ecological gamble that was far too dangerous. The most important point is that the problem of the Kubuchi Desert was not just a lack of water. Even with water, sand cannot instantly turn into living soil. Sand is too loose, it cannot hold moisture, it does not contain enough organic matter, and it lacks the root networks and microorganisms needed to support life for the long term. That is why many tree planting projects in desert regions have failed. People can plant trees, and they can water them for a while, but if the ground underneath is only dry sand with no biological foundation, the roots will gradually weaken, the water will drain away too quickly, and in the end, the trees will still die. So what China needed to restore was not just green color on the surface, but an entire living cycle beneath the ground. Drought-resistant plants were planted to hold the sand in place. Plant biomass became food for the rabbits, and the rabbits' waste, after being properly processed, returned to the soil to add organic matter. That cycle was the real secret. The desert did not come back to life because of one single action, but because each layer of the system started connecting with the others. When the soil could hold organic matter, plants had a chance to take root. When plants could hold the sand, the wind could no longer carry everything away. And when that cycle worked long enough, the dead land finally began to show signs of life again. In this system, Rex rabbits played 3 important roles at the same time. First, they turned dry plants, wild grass, and drought-resistant shrubs into a valuable source of organic fertilizer. Materials that were almost useless to humans were transformed by the rabbits into matter that could be returned to the ground. The second role was creating economic value for local communities. The rabbits did not only produce fertilizer, but also provided meat, fur, and a production chain that could be maintained over the long term. When people could earn income from the very land being restored, they had a reason to protect it instead of leaving it to the sand and dust. The third role was what made this model so different. Plants were grown to hold the sand in place. Those plants then became food for the rabbits. The rabbits created organic waste, and that waste returned to feed the soil. It sounded like a simple icicle, but if even one link was missing, the entire system could collapse. But even with plants, organic fertilizer, and rabbits, the Kubuchi Desert still had another enemy: extreme heat and sand-filled winds. During the summer, the ground could become so hot that moisture evaporated very quickly, putting young plants at risk of drying out before their roots could take hold. That is why solar panels were added to the system. They did not only generate electricity, they also worked like a giant roof over the desert. Beneath those panels, the temperature dropped, the wind was blocked, and moisture stayed in the soil for longer. This protective layer gave plants a better chance to survive. The rabbits returned organic matter to the soil. The plants held the sand in place, and the solar panels protected the surface from the harsh conditions of the desert. When these three layers worked together, the dead land began to change in an almost unbelievable way. The final result was not that the Kubuchi Desert turned into a green forest overnight. What was truly astonishing was that land once considered useless began creating value again. Plants held the sand in place, the soil slowly gained organic matter, the ecosystem recovered, and more than 6,460 square kilometers of degraded land were restored after decades of work. However, this model is not a formula that can be easily copied everywhere. If the rabbits lose control, if the organic fertilizer is processed incorrectly, or if the plants and solar panels are placed the wrong way, the entire system can backfire. The biggest lesson from Kubuki is that bringing a dead land back to life cannot depend on one animal or one technology alone. It requires a system that is patient enough, precise enough, and long-lasting enough to give life a chance to return. If you found this story interesting, please hit like and subscribe to the channel for more strange stories about nature and the recovery of our planet. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.